Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Tony Berrient, and I serve as the president for the Hearing Well Club here in Laguna Woods Village. I also serve on the Board of Trustees for the Hearing Loss Association of America, California State Association. I also serve as the Southern California State Coordinator for HLAA, and I'm on the Get in the Loop Committee for HLAA National Office. I want to thank Caption Call. Let me see here. I want to thank Caption Call. They are our sponsor today. They're providing captions. And Caption Call provides the gold standard for captioning telecommunications. So Caption Call provides amplification and captions for people with hearing loss because life is calling. And they provide telephones for landline service, provide captions for cell phones, and will provide captions on your iPad. So for those who are interested in checking that out, they provide captions at no charge. They will do an in-home installation and provide instructions at no charge. All right. Call 877. I'm going to put this in your chat box as soon as I can get to it. All right. Okay. I'll be doing that in a minute. As long as I'm sharing screen, I'm limited, it seems like. Okay, there are two ways, there's one way to view captions today. To turn on subtitles for captions, you want to click on the CCC button that's in your taskbar down below. And then click on Show Subtitle. Go back in to adjust the size of your captions. So you would click on Subtitle Settings, and as you can see here, I don't know if you can see here, you can slide this to make larger captions. Okay. I want to talk about, let's see, I'm going to remain muted during the presentation. There will be an opportunity to answer questions after the presentation, and you can also submit questions as you think of it in the chat box. So I will explain in just a moment what the chat box is. So I want to explain to you the raise the hand feature. That is also something you can use. Let me, in participants, you want to click on the toolbar below that says participants, and you will see the participants. So right now there are 46. In my demonstration here, there's only 2. You will see, you want to click on participants and open it up. And when you do, you should see the raise hand feature. You can practice that now if you want to. Okay, 2 people have raised your hands, and now you can unraise your hands. Put it down. To unmute your microphone to speak. Before you speak, remember to unmute your microphone. You can do this in the main participant meeting screen, or go to the participant window and click unmuted. There's a red line that runs through the microphone icon on computers, that's lower left corner. But if you have a keyboard, you could also press the space bar to temporarily mute while you speak. And when you release the space bar, you'll be muted again. Okay, the chat box. The chat box is available for you to send messages to everybody or privately to any individual that is in the meeting. I will also be sending messages to you through the chat box. Use the chat box to write in your questions to be answered after the presentation. So there's two ways to send a chat. First of all, the default is when you type in the chat box, it goes to everybody. But if you use the little drop-down box, you can choose a name from the participants and send a message privately. Okay. Oh, here it is again. Yeah. Now, if the chat box activity interferes with your captions, you can open the chat box completely and you can move it aside.
I can't hear anything.
Now, I'm providing instructions for computer users, Mac, laptop, desktop, PC users. For those using other devices, we'll have to have a meeting about that to explain that. Okay. So, any questions about?
All right. Well, I'm going to miss this one today. I'm sorry. I'm missing it.
So, let me see.
I would like to leave. Can I?
Okay, Joey Sims, want to unmute yourself?
I'm
Ask
on
your
here,
question.
but I can't hear it.
Okay, I'm going to lower the hand. All right.
Diana, is your computer on, the sound on your computer? Because sometimes that affects it if you don't have that up.
Okay, are you not hearing me?
Yes, someone was saying that they weren't hearing you.
Diane Murray was saying it.
I can't hear.
Okay. Well, I'm going to sign off in just a minute, and after I introduce our presenters. Oh, before I do that, I do have a poll I want to take. I just have one question. And so you're going to see a pop-up, and I want you to make a selection, and then I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to do your answer. So I'm launching the poll, and the question is, how did you hear about this meeting? $20 seconds. Okay. I'm going to end the polling now. We need to move along. So here are the results. So the majority of you have heard about the meeting through email. So thank you very much for doing that.
Okay, I want to go back to Zoom.
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody. One disclaimer, the Hearing Well Club does not endorse products or services. Mention of such is intended to provide the participants of this meeting with information on products and services that might be of interest, but not necessarily recommended or endorsed by the Hearing Well Club. Our topic today is the latest research on brain hearing, listening effort, and effective communication under challenging situations. We have two presenters today, Audiologist Dr. Majit and Dr. Chalese Buttars, both from Oticon Hearing Aid Solutions. All right, page 2. All right. So I think at this point, I am. Oh, Dr. Majit served as a technical specialist and account manager in the hearing aid industry for the past 42 years. Experience much? I think so. He received his doctorate in audiology from the Arizona School of Health Sciences. Dr. Chalese Buttars is an education and training specialist for Oticon, and she's an honors graduate from the AUD program at Utah State University. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this over to David and to Chalese. And please take the floor.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Tony. And I wanted to welcome everyone and thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're hoping this will prove informative and helpful for many of you. And we welcome your questions. We've set aside a good amount of time at the end of the presentation to address any questions or comments that you'd like to share with us and the rest of the group. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Tony for arranging this and for giving us the opportunity to speak to all of you. I also wanted to kind of give a shout out to a group that we work with very closely that's in your area called Amazing Hearing. I think many of you know the professional audiologist there, Ann Mundell. And I also wanted to welcome Dr. Laura Hunt to her practice. We look forward to having both of them work with you. They're, as I say, they're excellent audiologists, and they do an excellent job providing service for many of you. So thank you for joining us today. First and most importantly, I hope everyone is doing well. These are strange times, and I hope everyone is doing as well as possible under the present circumstances, considering all this craziness going on. I do want to let you know our goal again is to give you as much information as we can about hearing loss, new research, and also hearing devices that really should allow all of you to improve significantly your communication ability, no matter what or how challenging the environment is. And if I'm correct in assuming that many of your situation, that the situation that's most bothersome for many of you is when you get into challenging situations, large groups, noisy restaurants, and Dr. Buttars is going to address that and discuss how we can improve on your communication skills there. With that said, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Chalese Buttars, who's going to take us through the presentation.
Thanks, Dr. Majit. Will you let me know, can you hear me okay? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sounds great. Thank you again, everybody. Like Dr. Majit said, we do appreciate the time that you've let us come here to present some information that we hope is informative for you. So we have a number of different topics that we're going to kind of breeze through today. I feel like with each of these topics, we could maybe potentially spend an hour or more talking about, but we're going to kind of skim and give you a brief overview of what we have to talk about today. So with the agenda and what we have planned, I want to mention and talk a little bit about brain hearing. Brain hearing is a term that we at Oticon use quite often. Now, brain hearing is on a lot of our marketing pieces that we hand out, but it's also kind of a philosophy that we take as a manufacturer. And the whole idea behind brain hearing is we know that our ears and our hearing is a system, and to have our ears to be able to work together with our brain is very important. So we as a company have really focused on trying to create features that can give the brain what it needs in terms of sound. So we'll talk a little bit more about hearing as a process and brain hearing. I also want to discuss listening effort. Listening effort is something that we at Oticon have done quite a bit of research on. And when we have launched a new hearing aid to the market the past couple of launches, listening effort is something we've actually done research on. And the way that we look at listening effort is very fascinating. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because we have a very objective way at looking at listening effort via something called pupillometry. So that's something that we'll talk a little bit about, and we'll talk about what the research has been able to show with this listening effort via pupillometry. I also want to talk about hearing better in background noise. Background noise is typically the #1 complaint for the majority of patients that different hearing care providers will see in their clinics. Now, hearing in background noise is not, and difficulties with hearing in background noise are not specific just to individuals with hearing loss. But individuals with normal or typical hearing, we also have a difficult time hearing when there's a lot of background noise. But background noise is the #1 biggest complaint that we as hearing healthcare professionals hear as patients come into our offices. Now, there are some things that we can do to try to improve how patients can hear in background noise. And so we'll talk about some of those things. And a couple of the things that I want to mention within this are first, talking a little bit about different levels of technology. Within all of the manufacturers of hearing aids, there are different levels of technology that patients have to choose from. So I want to talk a little bit about the different levels of technology, again, just very surface level, and talk about, especially when hearing in background noise, what are the benefits of a higher level of technology over a lower level of technology. With this, I also want to talk a little bit about connectivity. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail when it comes to connectivity, but connectivity and accessories are one of the devices that hearing healthcare professionals have to be able to help a patient hear better in background noise. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Now, I have a couple of poll questions, just like Tony did at the first of the presentation. So if you'll go ahead and Tony, if you'll pull up this poll question. The first poll question that I want to ask is, are you presently using hearing devices? Yes or no? Okay, great. The results are coming in. Looks like quite a few people have answered here. 43 out of 54 have voted. And right now, the overwhelming majority are yes. 83% of you are using hearing devices, and 17% of you are not using hearing devices.
Okay, we're going to end the polling.
Thanks, Tony. And now I have one more question that I want to ask just quickly. So the majority of you are using hearing devices. Now, this is specific for those patients who are not using a hearing device. So for those patients that are not, or for all of you who are not using a hearing device, why have you chosen not to move forward with hearing devices? Is it A, you don't have hearing loss? B, hearing loss has not impacted communication? Is it C, cost? D, cosmetics? Or E, is there another reason? Tony, if you'll go ahead and pull up that poll for me. So again, this is specific to those individuals of you who are attending that are not wearing hearing devices. I think this is the wrong poll, Tony. If you'll go ahead and pull up a different poll question, this is one that we want to go ahead and do for later. Tony?
This is, okay.
Sorry, this is a different poll question. We'll go ahead and do this one later. So if you'll pull up the one for...
Okay, we'll go back to this one. Sorry.
No, that's okay, no problem.
We did that one. Oh, okay. Is this, if you use hearing devices, do you use an app?
No, it's the other one. So if you are not presently a hearing device user is how it should start. And if you can't find it, that's
fine. You're not currently using a hearing device?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Sorry.
No, that's all right, Tony. Thanks.
We got them mixed up a little bit.
All right. So for those of you, thanks, Tony. For those of you not using a hearing device, why? Okay, so we have a couple of people polling here. And it looks like the majority so far is that hearing loss has not impacted communication. Okay, Tony, I think we can end that. Go ahead and end the poll. Thanks, everybody, for answering these questions, it helps get a little bit of a feel for the audience. So it looks like the overwhelming majority of you are using a hearing device, and if you're not, it looks like you don't feel like hearing loss has impacted communication. So that's good for me to know.
It's not, it's because of the coronavirus, I'm at home, so I'm not using my hearing aids.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So if you answered other, that is a reason if you're not around other people. Thanks for that, Winnie.
Yeah.
Now, your hearing and how hearing works is absolutely fascinating. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the anatomy, but the way that any of our senses work, we have vision, we have touch, feel, smell, all of the different senses that we have. It's absolutely amazing how we can take information from a peripheral system up to the brain, and then the brain can make sense of that information. Now, hearing loss is the exact same. So hearing is not just what we see on the outer ear where we have our ears, but there's a whole system behind that that's working for us to be able to not only hear, but to also be able to understand what is being said. Now with that, we have our middle ear, you have the inner ear that looks like a little seashell, and within that there are very fine and tiny microscopic hair cells that send the signal to the nerve, which sends it up to the brain. Now, when the signal is sent up to the brain, that's where we actually have our understanding of what's being said. One of the things that I feel like is amazing, and I wanted to talk about it, is the fact that we have both of our ears working together to be able to send those inputs up to the brain. Now, with that, it's something that we call binaural hearing. With binaural hearing, for the majority of people out there, there are a lot of benefits that can come from having both the right input and the left input. And when we think about some of these benefits, first, the one that I wanted to talk about is the ability that we have with binaural hearing, having both the right and the left input, to be able to orient ourselves in our environments. So for instance, if I go outside and if I am watering my roses out on my front lawn, and if all of a sudden a bird chirps, and if I want to be able to know where that bird is coming from, I have the ability to know that based off of binaural hearing. With that, if you've ever thought about how do you have the ability to know where sound is coming from, that's directly linked to our ability to localize. So for instance, again, if that bird is chirping on the right-hand side, the timing difference and the loudness difference between the two ears is what's going to be able to help our brain understand where sound is coming from. So since it chirps on the right side, it's going to be louder on the right ear and hit the right ear first before it does with the left ear. Now the brain can take all of these two differences and be able to help us to know where sound is coming from. The other ability of our brain to be able to recognize sounds, so to be able to know if your husband is talking or if your grandchild is talking or your wife is talking, to be able to know the difference, and then also to be able to understand what's being said. Now there is a difference between hearing and listening or comprehension, and that's something we'll touch on a little bit later. With binaural hearing, one of the other benefits that we have is the ability to be able to focus on what we want to listen to. And if there's a lot of background noise, we can have the ability to kind of separate that out and really focus on what's being said and try to ignore the background noise. This is one of the abilities that we have with that binaural hearing, being able to have the input from both the right and the left ear. And one of the difficult things with this is, as somebody has a hearing loss, your ability to be able to focus on what you want to focus on and ignore the other sounds, that ability starts to decrease. And so individuals that have hearing loss, typically one of the biggest complaints they have is being able to try to hear in background noise. It's very difficult for individuals with normal or typical hearing, and it's even more difficult typically for individuals that have hearing loss. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But often what comes with that is increased need or increased listening effort. So putting more effort into listening into different social situations. Now, besides this, thinking about hearing, being able to socialize and understand what's being said is very important in any communication. But hearing loss has not only been linked to an ability or inability to be able to hear and understand, but hearing loss has been linked to other health issues as well. One of the things that we often say at Oticon is hearing care is healthcare, and that is true because of the links they've found with hearing loss and with a number of other health issues. I have a video that I want to play for you. It's very brief, it's about a minute, but in this video, we will talk about what some of those other health issues have been linked to hearing loss. So let's go ahead and we'll watch that now. All right. So one of the things that the video mentioned is that hearing loss is the second most common health issue globally. But when we look specifically at the US, hearing loss is the third largest public health issue. And if we look specifically at numbers, there are around 40 million Americans affected by hearing loss. Now, I like to bring this up and talk about this because if you are one of those individuals that has hearing loss, you are definitely not alone. And there's a large portion of the population, not only in the US, but globally, that does have a hearing loss. Now, the World Health Organization comes out with numbers that they update in terms of global hearing loss. And the last time that they presented some numbers was in 2018. And at that time, they mentioned that there are 466 million people with a disabling hearing loss. Now, they also said at that time that in 2050, they are projecting that there will be about 900 million people with a disabling hearing loss. So hearing loss is a very common issue. Now, when looking at some of the things that were presented in that short video clip that hearing loss is related to, things like depression or social isolation, mental tiredness, which is linked to listening effort. But we also have, in that video, it mentions dementia. Now, there was a study that was done in a very well-known medical journal in the Lancet journal. And what this study actually looked to do was to look at different risk factors for dementia. Now, within this study, they talk about different risk factors. Some of these risk factors were potentially modifiable, which meant that maybe we could, with these risk factors, if we had changes within these risk factors, you could potentially delay the onset of dementia or prevent the onset of dementia. Now, there were also potentially non-modifiable risk factors, and with those, there's nothing that you can do within that set of risk factors to be able to do anything to delay or prevent dementia. Now, the way that this was laid out is they said about 35% of risk factors are potentially modifiable and 65% are potentially non-modifiable. To look at this a little bit further, they laid out the differences or the 9 risk factors that they found that were part of those potentially modifiable risk factors. And they also put them in the lifespan. So they had risk factors that were related to early life, to midlife, and then also to late life. Now within this, and the risk factor of the 9 risk factors that made up the potentially modifiable risk factors, that 35%, the biggest risk factor in this was hearing loss at 9%. Now with this, there were a lot of studies that were looked at that went into this Lancet journal. Within our industry, one of the things that I'm hoping we will have continued research on is looking at how do hearing devices go towards preventing or delaying that onset of dementia. And that's something that we need to continue to look for and to research on within our field. Now, Dr. Majit, do you have something that you would like to discuss with this?
I would like to add on to that. Thank you, Dr. Butters. As Dr. Butters referred to, there are many studies over the last 5 or 6 years in particular that have looked at the relationship between declining cognitive processing and hearing loss. The largest study that at least I'm aware of, it looked at 3,670 individuals, and it was over a 25-year program that they followed these people. And the name of the study, if anyone wants to look it up, was called Self-Reported Hearing Loss, Hearing Aids, and Cognitive Decline in Elderly Adults. And so the objective was to investigate the association between hearing loss, hearing aid use, and cognitive decline, as I mentioned. What the results were that they found that people who did report hearing loss and did not do anything to mitigate their hearing problem, there was a significant difference when they tested the cognition of that individual, which they would do every 2 years. There was a noticeable decline. However, the people who did report hearing loss but did wear hearing aids, they scored on the cognition test just about the same. They couldn't tell any significant difference from those with a hearing loss wearing hearing aids and those who had normal hearing. So this was a pretty significant finding. This is not to scare people into running to get hearing aids because they're concerned about getting dementia or Alzheimer's, but it is something that one needs to take in consideration. As Dr. Butters mentioned, there is a lot of relationships to different illnesses and hearing loss, and one of them being dementia or Alzheimer's. Go ahead. That was my contribution to that discussion.
Thanks,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Majit. Thanks for talking a little bit about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, with one of the things that is also related, and the video mentioned a little bit about this, is mental tiredness. Now, when we have to put a lot of listening effort into a task, it can tend to make us a little bit more tired than if we were able to just sit there passively and take in the information. So what I want to talk a little bit about next is listening effort. But before we do that, I have another poll question here, Tony, so if you'll pull that up. The poll question is, which setting have you found yourself having the most difficulty hearing and understanding? In A, a restaurant, B, a group, C, in a car, or D, one-on-one conversation with a friend? Thanks, Tony. All right, we have about 36 of you, 41 of you have polled in here. Thanks for answering these. These are beneficial. All right, so this is exactly what I expected, and this goes towards my point. The majority of individuals, when they have troubles listening, and if you think about situations before COVID-19, social situations that you may have been in a week's time, 3 or 4 months ago, and think about these situations, it's typically in places where there's a lot of background noise, where we have a hard time not only hearing, but being able to understand. And I think it's important to talk about the differences between hearing and being able to perceive that there's sound, but understanding and listening is a completely separate thing. Understanding is where we actually have that comprehension and have that ability to understand what's being said. And in noisy situations, the ability to understand, especially for people with hearing loss, becomes much more difficult. One of the things that we often look at Oticon is listening effort. Now, listening effort, in my opinion, is very fascinating because I feel like measuring this should be a difficult thing. But some years back, they actually found out that they could measure this objectively using something that they call pupillometry. Now, what they do with that is they have a device that basically is able to look at the size of somebody's pupil. And as the size of somebody's pupil dilates and get bigger, they can see that they're putting more listening effort into a task. Now, Oticon, for the last 2 launches of hearing aids that we've had, we've looked at listening effort. We wanted to be able to see that the hearing aid that we were bringing to market compared to the older hearing aid, that we actually had benefit and that we were bringing something better to market. So listening effort is one of the ways that we looked at this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of that study in a few slides. One of the difficult things for individuals with hearing loss, though, is to be able to organize sounds that are coming in. And I alluded to this a little bit at the beginning of the presentation when we talked about binaural hearing. Patient has the ability, or individuals have the ability, to take in sound and to be able to focus on what they want to and ignore the background noise or the sounds they don't want to pay attention to. And that's how we have selective attention. When an individual starts to get hearing loss, and as the hearing loss starts to progress and get worse, typically the ability that somebody has to be able to organize these sounds and to be able to ignore that background noise, that ability starts to decrease, and hearing, not hearing, but understanding can become much more difficult. Now, there's a specific process that we can look at with this. So first, because of hearing loss, our brain, it receives a little bit less sound information than we had normal or typical hearing. Now, because the brain is receiving less information, it makes it harder for us to be able to recognize sounds that are coming in. Now, what the brain has to try to do is focus and put more attention into tasks, and we have to try to concentrate harder so we can fill in the gaps because we're not getting all the information that we need. Now, one of these things that we found, as somebody puts more listening effort into a task, the ability that somebody has to try to remember and recall a conversation that they've had, that ability starts to decrease because the brain is putting so much effort into listening. So we know that listening effort and being able to remember or recall conversations, those 2 things somewhat go hand in hand. Now, that's one of the other things that we've looked at with our research that I'll talk a little bit about. But what Oticon has basically tried to do is to try to come up with features that go towards this idea of brain hearing. How can we make hearing easier on the brain? And what features can we create to make that hearing and understanding easier? Now, one of the features that I want to talk a little bit about that's specific to Oticon is to try to compare this feature to what has typically been done within the hearing aid industry. Now, as we've mentioned, and as we saw with our poll question, the areas where individuals have the most difficulty hearing is in background noise. We know that, and it's not specific just to patients with hearing loss, but it's the same for individuals with normal or typical hearing. Now, for individuals with hearing loss, that ability starts to decrease, as I mentioned, because of what hearing loss does to the sending the signal up to the brain. Now, traditionally within hearing aid technology, one of the features that a number of manufacturers have used is to try to use what we call full directionality. Now, what this looks like, let's say that this man right here is using hearing aids, has one on the right ear and one on the left ear. Now, what the hearing aids will do and what the microphone of the hearing aids does is it tries to focus on only what's coming from in front, like you can see in this image. And what it does is all of the background noise that may be coming from behind or to the side, all of that is not going to be picked up by the microphone, and only what's coming from in front will be picked up. Now, this situation is something that Oticon wanted to try to figure out how to do better. If you think about the dynamic situations that all of you have in terms of listening, and if you're with your friends and you're with a group of people and maybe a waiter comes behind, or maybe there's another group of people that tries to get your attention over here, we listen in very dynamic situations. Very rarely are we ever in, at least myself, and I would be interested if it was the same for you, but very rarely am I ever in just a one-on-one conversation with somebody in a noisy environment. Now, taking this into account, Oticon tried to do something a little bit differently. Some years ago, we came out with a different feature. And what this allowed us to do within the hearing aid was not only have to focus on just what's coming from in front, like you saw in the previous image, but what this has allowed us to do, because the hearing aids are working so quickly, is be able to give this patient access to 360 degrees around them. With this, what the hearing aids do, and it's amazing how they work, once they recognize that speech is within that environment, It's going to take the speech and make sure that that has the most emphasis. And if noise is coming from around, the patient will still have access to other sounds, but they're not going to be disturbing. Now, as with most features in most of the manufacturers and most hearing aids, one of the great things and why hearing care providers are so important is they have the ability to be able to listen to feedback that you have and be able to make fine-tuning adjustments based off the feedback. And this feature is the exact same. Based off of somebody's listening preferences or their abilities to be able to listen, they can make this feature either more aggressive or less aggressive. There was some research that we did when we came out with this feature where we wanted to look at speech understanding, we wanted to look at listening effort, and we also wanted to look at memory recall. So what we did is we compared all of these things with the hearing aid that we were bringing onto the market to the older hearing aid that we had on the market at that time, and we did a comparison. Now what we found with the new hearing aid that we were bringing to the market was with this hearing aid, there was 30% better speech understanding, 20% less listening effort, and that there was 20% better ability to recall conversations. Another study that was done with this type of device is we wanted to look at a group of individuals with hearing loss that were using this feature that I talked about. This OpenSound Navigator is the name. We wanted to compare a group of individuals using this feature to a group of individuals with normal or typical hearing. How would these individuals with hearing loss using this feature compare to a normal or typical hearing group? Now, the way that they did this study and how many studies are done within the hearing aid industry is a lot of times they're done in noisy situations. We want to be able to mimic the most difficult listening situations that individuals will experience. So down here on this bar, if you look, this is looking at the signal to noise ratio. Now, what the signal to noise ratio is, we look at the signal, which is basically what I want to pay attention to. So if I'm having a conversation, that person's voice would be the signal. And then the noise, anything else that is causing noise would be the noise. Now, when we have a signal to noise ratio, a higher signal to noise ratio is a much easier listening situation than a lower signal to noise ratio. Higher signal to noise ratio means that what I'm trying to pay attention to is louder than the background noise, and it's easier to listen. Now, if we look down here, we got into very difficult listening situations. So a -5 dB signal to noise ratio is a very difficult listening situation because that means the noise was louder than what I was trying to pay attention to. Now, with this study, they looked at word recognition, and they also looked at pupillometry, the dilation and constriction of the pupil. And they compared these different groups to see how they would perform. And what they found with this is that these individuals that were using this technology performed on par with these normal or typical hearing individuals. Now, with this study, it's not to say that with a hearing aid, with any hearing aid on the market, that we can give you normal hearing back. That's not going to be the case. Once hearing loss happens, typically, it's going to be permanent. But what this shows is that with this technology, we were able to give these patients, or these individuals, the ability to perform in these very difficult listening situations and on par with their normal or typical hearing peers. Now, when talking about a couple of things to do with trying to hear better in background noise, I feel like technology is an important thing to talk a little bit about. Now, with any of the hearing aid manufacturers on the market today, they all have different levels of technology. Typically, it's separated out into a premium, mid-level, and then a basic type of level of technology. Within these hearing aids and at Oticon, one of the things that we often say is that the highest level of technology should be the standard of care. And that the individuals who are looking at hearing technology should always at least know what the benefits of the higher level of technology may be compared to other levels of technology. Now with this, I'm not going to do a big explanation within this because within this, there are a lot of different features that are working differently within different levels of technology. But one of the biggest things that I want to point out with this is one of the biggest differences in terms of the level of technology is a person's ability that they're going to have to be able to hear and understand in background noise. With a higher level of technology, the ability for you and your expectations on how you're going to do in terms of hearing and understanding in background noise should be a little bit higher than a lower level of technology. And that's basically because of how the features are working within the different hearing aids. Now at Oticon, we have 3 different levels of technology in our top tier, but we also have a basic level, or what we call an essential level of technology as well. This hearing aid just came on the market, and it's called Ruby. Ruby was launched May 12th, and there are a lot of features in Ruby that make this a nice option in this kind of basic level of technology. But when it comes to somebody's ability to be able to perform and do well in background noise, it's not going to be as great with Ruby as it would be with a higher level of technology. So somebody's expectations with Ruby would maybe have to be a little bit more limited than they would be with a higher level of technology, especially in those noisy or difficult listening situations. All right, Tony, let's go ahead and pull up our last poll question, if you would. So it should start out, if you use hearing devices. So this question is specific for those individuals using hearing devices. Do you use an app to control your hearing device volume, your programs, etc.? All right. Okay, looking at all of these, we have a large number of you who voted here. I think we can close the poll, Tony. 41 of you looked like you were polled on this, and 63% of you said you do use an app, and 37% of you don't use an app. So that's good to know that, but the majority of you are using an app to be able to control your devices. One of the things that's really nice about an app, and it's not specific to Oticon, there are all manufacturers, I believe, have an app that you would be able to use with your hearing aids. One of the nice things about the app is the app should be free, and you have the ability to go in and discreetly change the volume or the programs. So instead of having to touch the onboard controls to your hearing devices, you have the ability to do that with an app on your phone. Within our app, we also have the ability to find my hearing aids. I know hearing aids are an easy thing to be able to lose. So if you've lost your hearing aids, what the app can help you do is try to locate them. Let's say that if you lost them within your house, as you get closer to the hearing aids, the app is going to let you know that you've gotten closer to the hearing aids. And if you're walking away from them, it's going to let you know that you're getting farther away. The other thing, and I know that you recently had a presentation on tinnitus. So Tony had mentioned that you recently had somebody coming in talking about tinnitus. But within the app, if you have a tinnitus program, and if that's something that you suffer from and the hearing care provider has given you the ability within the hearing aid to have a tinnitus program, you have the ability to be able to adjust that within our app and make adjustments based on what you need that day. One of the great things about connectivity, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, is we know that hearing aids can only do so much. So for individuals, if they have hearing aids, it's not going to be able to give them normal hearing back again. There are still going to be some limitations, especially looking at how severe your hearing loss is. One of the great things about connectivity and accessories is the ability that we have to help individuals, especially in noisy situations, to be able to hear and understand better. One of the things that these accessories can do is improve that signal to noise ratio. That signal to noise ratio that we talked about within that research, for you to be able to hear what you want to hear and try to ignore what you don't want to hear. And Dr. Majit, do you have some input on this?
I do, thank you. What we found and what the research indicates is that one who uses like what we call a connect clip or a remote microphone can double or even more improve their understanding no matter what the environment is, even if it's a very noisy situation. So if you're in a car, you're in a noisy restaurant, you're in a noisy group, and you are speaking kind of one-on-one with an individual, even though there's a lot of noise around you, using this connect clip, as we call it, can enhance your understanding ability dramatically. As you know, when you have a hearing test, the audiologist will do two things. They'll put a headset on and do what we call an audiogram. You kind of push the button or say yes when you hear the little beeps. The other part is what we call speech testing, and you're supposed to repeat words. And these types of devices, like a Connect clip, a remote microphone, really help, especially for those people who have poor understanding ability. We'll see some people, if sound is comfortable enough, they'll get 80, 90% understanding if it's made loud enough. However, even if it's at a comfortable level, there are people whose hearing system is so impaired that even under ideal conditions, they only understand 20, 30, 40%. Those people especially can benefit from these devices, and one would be really happily surprised on how much benefit they can provide. So I would encourage you to ask your hearing care professional about these if you're not doing as well as you'd like to with your present hearing aids. Thank you, Chalese.
Thanks, Dr. Majit. So with that, to talk just a little bit, and this is the case for the majority of manufacturers out there, they have the ability to have a remote mic system. Now, what a device like this, and in Oticon, it's called the Connect clip, but what this device allows you to do is give this device to somebody, and it functions as a microphone. So it will take your voice, and it will send that directly and transmit that directly to the hearing aids. So the ability for you to be able to hear that voice, since it's directly from the hearing aids, noise is not going to be as overwhelming or distracting. Well, that's one of the great things. And again, if you are wanting to talk to your hearing care professional about this, you could ask them about a remote mic solution. And this really can give an increased ability to be able to hear, especially in noisy situations. One of the other things that's very nice, and again, I would say the majority of manufacturers have a device like this, is the ability to be able to stream information from your television directly to the hearing aids. Sure, many of you have had an experience where maybe you have been at home and you want to listen to the TV a little bit louder than everybody else. Now with a device like this, since you get that direct input into the hearing aid, you have the ability to be able to adjust the volume however loud you want it in the hearing devices. And then individuals who are watching TV with you have the ability to change and adjust the volume on the TV. So having connectivity devices, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail about this, but these devices are there for you to try to make your lives easier and for you to be able to communicate easier. A couple more things that I just wanted to mention. Number one, rechargeable solutions. There are lots of rechargeable solutions out there, and it's amazing how when I started grad school about 8 or 10 years ago, how much rechargeable solutions have changed and how these have increasingly got better. So if you're interested in a rechargeable solution, they are much better than they used to be 8 or 10 years ago. And when looking at charge times and the amount of hours that you can use, even when streaming from different connectivity devices, rechargeable solutions have really come a long way. The last thing that I thought it was important to mention is our remote care system. Now, again, the majority of manufacturers have a system like this, but telehealth has become a big thing within the healthcare industry. Some of you, I'm sure, have probably had a telehealth meeting or an appointment with your doctor where you talk to them through an app, tell them what's going on, and then maybe they give you a prescription or advice through your phone. Now, something that we were able to release about 3 months ago at the height of COVID-19 was this remote care solution. And what this allows you to do is to be able to connect to your hearing care provider via an app on your phone, and you can see and you can hear them and you can talk to them about what are some of the things that you're having difficulty, and the hearing care provider can actually make adjustments and do those fine-tuning follow-up appointments for you over an app on your phone. If this is something that you're interested in, I encourage you to talk to your hearing care provider to see if there is a telehealth solution for them to be able to do follow-ups for your hearing aids. Especially thinking about California, since I am from Utah, traffic is usually not as bad here. In California, traffic can be terrible, and trying to find sometimes a place to park can also be difficult. So having something like this can be very nice and convenient. Now, we've talked about quite a bit in this, and again, I want to thank you for your time, but just to summarize some of the things that we have talked about, at Oticon, we really do believe that hearing care is healthcare, especially since there have been so many links to hearing loss and other health issues that are out there, but also being able to communicate and to not only hear, but to be able to understand. With listening effort, this is something that we as a company have focused on, and I encourage you, if you're interested in this, to have a deeper discussion with your hearing care providers about listening effort. How are the hearing aids helping you in terms of decreasing that listening effort you have to put into those noisy situations? Finally, listening in background noise, like I said, is the #1 most difficult situation for patients to be in. So having the ability and looking at the differences in technology levels, having that conversation if that's something you're wanting to talk to your hearing care professional about, but then also looking into different pieces of connectivity to see how can those different pieces of connectivity really make your life a little bit easier in terms of being able to communicate and socialize with others. Now with that, again, I feel like we could have focused on any one of those things for about an hour, but we kind of breezed through that. Do you have any questions that we can try to answer?
Just a couple of quick comments before we get to that. First of all, Chalese, I wanted to thank you. I thought you did a very nice job. But two quick things. With all of the different features that we talked about, we're still convinced and we still feel that it's a must to have T-coils when you're purchasing a hearing aid. So you want to make sure that whoever you get a device from, that a T-coil is included, because I know even in Laguna Woods that you have your different facilities, religious services, meetings, and clubhouses are all equipped with T-coil use. So we would certainly advocate for that. Secondly, I'd just like to say where Chalese went over the different levels of technology, and they're all very good. Obviously, depending on what you can afford, we always recommend the standard care, but that's something you need to discuss with your professional. But talking about your professional, you can purchase the very best hearing aids around and not do very well. And it's not typically the fault of the instrument. You have to visit with someone who really understands hearing loss, has the experience. Both Chalese and our audiologists, we're a little biased when it comes to the professional that you see. We certainly advocate for audiologists. We feel that when you see your hearing care provider, when you're finished your trial period, which everyone should have a period to evaluate a hearing aid before they decide to purchase it, just by them asking you, how'd you do? And you say, well, I did okay. That's not enough. If they're professionals, they should be doing things like real ear measurements to get an objective validation of your fitting. They should be doing things like speech and noise testing to really evaluate the performance of the instrument and how much better you can doing. So those are considerations aside from just the technology, the provider that you're visiting with. And so you want to keep that in mind. With that, Chalese, I'll turn the question and answer period back over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Majit. Those are helpful. And I apologize that I forgot T-coil. That is an important ability to be able to have within the hearing instrument. So thanks for pointing that out. On my end, it looks like there was a question. Somebody asked, I have Oticon, but don't know which one, 1, 2, or 3. And then they also said, I have it really hard to differentiate words when they are sung. So with that, a couple of things. With knowing which technology level, I encourage you to reach out to your hearing care provider. They would be able to tell you what that technology level is. But also when looking at different things that you have maybe complaints about or different situations that are hard, and it looks like in this one, the situation is when something is sung. There are some things within the hearing aids, as I said, that really can be adjusted in terms of the features and how they're functioning. Now, one of the things that we have within the hearing aids is an ability to put in a music program within there. And I don't know for sure if that would help, but there is some fine tuning that your hearing care professional should be able to look at and some options that they should be able to try to help you with to try to make this situation a little bit better for you. So one of the things I would encourage you is to be able to go back to the hearing care provider and have a discussion on what you feel like you're struggling with and see what options they have to try to make that a little bit easier. I think somebody raised their hand.
Yes.
David, did you have something, Dr. Majit?
Yes, I think Rena had raised her hand. Rena, if you want to unmute your microphone, then we can all hear the question, or you can just chat it. Do you know how to unmute your microphone so we can hear you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh, terrific.
So
Thank you, Rena.
I have a hearing aid that Bidex. Is it the same that Oticon? It's the difference between these two hearing aids, like Bidex Beyond. I have this hearing aid, and you were talking about Oticon. Is there any just difference between this hearing aid company?
Dr. Majid, you want to take that?
Yes, I'm sorry, which Rena, I missed, what kind of hearing aids do you have?
Videx
Okay.
Beyond.
There are basically 6 different major hearing aid manufacturers, and they all do a good job. Again, so Videx is a very good company. I know them very well. They make very good instruments. Are you doing well with the Videx instrument?
Yeah, I'm doing well, but some just point is that it doesn't, I have Android. It doesn't do many functions on Android. It needs to be like, I need to have iPhone that it will be, yeah, I will make more adjustment or just like more functions for iPhone than for Android. That's just the problem I have with, not to just adjust any program or anything, but overall it's okay. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, they make a good product. And again, if you're, like as Dr. Butters mentioned, if you're looking for some improvement, I would certainly encourage you to visit your hearing care professional. Take notes before you go in so you really don't forget, some of the points that you need improved. And again, they may not be able to totally eliminate the issue, but they should be able to improve on it. But you're wearing a good product. Videx makes a good hearing aid.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rena.
Okay, Sharon, you have a question?
Yes, I do. First of all, thank you. It was an excellent presentation. One problem I have a hearing aid in one ear and I wear a cochlear implant in the other. I have had very good success with an Oticon hearing aid that I had maybe 2 years ago. It was the Open right before the S came out. So sadly,
Okay, yeah.
I got it 3 months and missed the opportunity, to switch it, but it was a very good hearing aid. My problem is, as a cochlear brand cochlear implant wearer, the only accessories that synchronize are the resound. And I'm wondering if there is some point in the future that there will actually be some open architecture that will allow me to be able to utilize an Oticon hearing aid, have my cochlear brand implant, and be able to synchronize. One of the biggest issues I have in general with my hearing is 5 years after having my implant is having my brain fully synchronized between my right and left ear. And it's almost like there's still some kind of lag in my hearing. So the ability to stream is extremely, extremely important and helpful to me. Yeah. So that's one of my questions, but my biggest one. So I'll let you address that.
Chalese, did you want to take that or should I?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that's a great question. Yeah. In terms of an open architecture, so we can have that ability between cochlear and Oticon, I don't know of anything in the future that's coming up to be able to give that, that streaming ability between the cochlear implant and an Oticon hearing aid. David, do you know of anything that I don't know?
No, I mean, that is an excellent question, and that's something that would make a lot of sense. But everything is so proprietary that it's difficult. I know Oticon will be introducing their own cochlear implant within the US. It's being sold in Europe now in about a year, as soon as it's FDA approved. And their hearing aids will be what we call bimodal, where they'll communicate just like the resound and the cochlea. But again, what you're saying makes perfect sense, but I don't know if and when that will ever happen. It should, but I apologize for not being able to provide more information to you. But you are wearing a good hearing aid, even though it's not an open S. If it's an open, it has the same OpenSound Navigator, not quite as robust, but it is a very good hearing aid. But I understand, as far as them working together as a pair, it's not going to coordinate as well as if it was another company that is compatible with that.
Right. So what I've had to do is I've ended up going back to a resound, sadly, and I actually like the Oticon better, but I'm using the resound because the microphone and the phone and this TV streamer And I got to a point where I was either using my hearing aid or my implant, and that became too stressful. But you do make a very good product, and maybe one day I'll be able to wear it and
the only
stream
thing
with my cochlear brand.
Sure. The only thing I might suggest, Sharon, is that you might try with your Oticon a connect clip, because I think that overall will enhance your ability to communicate, especially in difficult situations, that much better, as Dr. Buttars had mentioned. So if you're willing to experiment a little bit, I would, visit your hearing care provider, ask him to borrow a connect clip, because I think you'll notice a very significant enhancement by using that with your Oticon instrument.
It's
Chalese,
excellent. I have it. Thank you.
Oh, you do? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, we have one more question from the chat box. Are you aware of any studies that look into the combined effect of hearing and vision loss on mental processing?
Chalese, I'll let you take that.
Hearing and vision loss on mental processing. Is that what they said? That was the question?
Yes, yes.
I don't, Dr. Majit, I can't think of any studies that I know particularly looking at that.
Yeah, I asked the question because I have both a hearing and vision loss, and I have 2 cochlear implants. And I know that, just as an example, since you were talking about restaurants, going into a restaurant and you're trying to filter out the voices, and then if the restaurant is dim and not being able to see, that just completely, I just sit there and enjoy my food most of the time. So I'm just wondering if anybody had done any studies about that, and if there are ways to improve mental processing.
That's a great question, and I can imagine how difficult that listening situation would be. A lot of times with somebody who may have hearing loss, having those visual cues can also be a very important thing to be able to understand. So having the hearing, but also the vision cues. So in a restaurant where it may be dark, that is a difficult thing. I'll go ahead and look on my end, and let me reach out to a couple of people and even do some investigating to see if I can see any type of research that looks at hearing and vision loss and the ability to be able to understand and how we could potentially improve that process. I'll look into that, and then I'll reach back out to Tony if I find anything.
Okay, we're really coming to an end. Deanna, are we good for another 7 minutes? Okay, Deanna is our captioner, and she's the one that's been presenting captions for you. So we do have a question in the chat box. What are the changes in hearing aids in the past 2 years? Oh my goodness, we could probably write a book, huh? Can you name at least a couple of really great improvements in the last couple of years?
Chalese, why don't you take that?
Yeah. Oh, Ann Mundell raised her hand. Is it a question, or did you want to address this, Dr. Mundell?
We can address it.
Yeah, why don't you, Ann?
But if you want to, I think it'd be good to be able to hear from you.
I would say probably the top 5 things that have improved in the last 2 years. Number 1 would be the speed of processing in the hearing aid. And because the hearing aids are getting faster, they are using artificial intelligence to help make decisions to improve the signal to noise ratio in the hearing aids very rapidly. So you're getting a cleaner sound in the midst of background noise because the technology is faster in its decision-making processes and in the speed of processing. The other thing is the rechargeability, that we now have more companies offering rechargeable hearing aids. And I would say the third thing is connectivity. So you've covered those today, but the connectivity to your iPhone, to your iPad, to your iWatch, to your computer, to your car, remote mics. There's so many new gadgets out there that are simple and easy to use. So the ease of use and the automation of technology is probably the biggest things that I've seen in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Dr.
you. Thank you, Ann. I appreciate it. And please, you or Laura, please, contribute. The only other thing I would add is the sound quality. Sound quality we find is very important. You know, the more natural the sound, the easier it is to hear, the better people do. And the sound quality, because of what Ann mentioned about the processing, has tremendously improved over what hearing aids used to sound like even 2 or 3 years ago.
I just want to tell everybody, thank you, Anne, for piping in there. Anne Mundell Noel from Amazing Hearing. She is the audiology advisor for the Hearing Well Club, and she provides Oticon hearing aids if you're interested. So, okay, any more questions? Raise your hand or put it in the chat box. And when I say raise your hand, you need to, I can't see everybody. We have so many people physically raising your hand. Oh, Lee?
I think
Okay,
Lee,
I
yes.
see you, Lee. So if you unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
I have found that since we've been in isolation, I can't tell whether my hearing's deteriorated or whether my hearing aids have deteriorated. Sure. But I don't seem to be able to control them. And right now, when I watch television, it feels like I'm listening to a foreign language. Sure. Occasionally, maybe one word in 10 I will get. And I know I'm set. The moment that our local office here, USA, opened up, I made an appointment, but that had been still about two weeks away. So I've in a sense, I'm not watching television at all, which has improved my reading. It's great. Yeah. But I was wondering, how often should you get your hearing aid tested as well as yourself?
I'll defer that to Anne. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes. Our patients normally come in every 4 to 6 months for a routine checkup after you have been fully adjusted with your hearing aids. But if you're noticing any change in your hearing and you're not sure if it's the hearing aid or your hearing, we actually can use the test that Dr. Majit suggested and that Tony talks about all the time in the Hearing Well Club, which is the real ear measurement. So we can put a little microphone in your ear, and in real time, we can play speech and see if your hearing aid is working to the best of its ability. So there's ways to objectively check that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to add that I always talk about this in club meetings, is to insist on a speech and noise test.
I'm sorry, say that again.
A speech and noise test.
Okay.
And also real ear. So the speech and noise test helps the audiologist to determine what hearing aid would be best for you and how you hear in noise. And that makes a big difference in the selection of hearing aid. Mm-hmm. The real ear measurement actually tests the hearing aid that you've just gotten and make sure that it matches the prescription that has been made for you. Make sure that it's running on all it's running completely, and that it tests your telecoil, and then if they do a speech and noise test again, they can see how it's satisfying you, so how it's working for you. So it's kind of behind the scenes figuring that out. People who have real ear tests by experienced audiologists are by and large much more successful with their hearing aids. It's critical, actually.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's really great input on that, and that is very important. Thanks, Anne. Yes, Lee, did you have another question?
Yeah,
Yes,
I was wondering, I have...
What I'm going to suggest is that whenever we get speakers, they shouldn't speak faster than the caption can capture their voice. Yes. Because I've lost the ends of sentences.
Oh boy.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Sorry about that. Next time I will definitely slow.
And I could catch, it captured every one of her sentences, every bit.
There will be a full transcript available
Wonderful.
if you want to go back. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think we could just take one more question. Winnie, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a hearing aid now for several years. It's biphonic hearing aids because I have more loss on my left ear than my right. And with this testing that you're talking about, I've never heard of that, the real ear test. Would that help me determine, you know, how good they're working at this point, or if I need new hearing aids?
Yes, I think that you would need a hearing evaluation to see where your hearing is at now. But since Anne is the expert when it comes to real ear, I'll turn this back over to her again.
So yes, actually your audiogram is stored inside your hearing aid. And when we pull up your Phonak hearing aid on the computer, we can get a reading of where the hearing aid was set based upon that hearing loss. And then we can measure and see whether or not the hearing aid is on the target and meeting the need, or if it needs adjustment. So those kinds of things can be done before you think about new technology. We want to try to make it so that you're getting the most out of what you currently have.
Yeah, and I have a music app in it that Dr. Dennis Colucci put in, that, you know, because I go to the Pacific Symphony when it's open.
Right.
You know, and it's helped a lot with, instead of having that tinny sound that I had with old hearing aids, you know, I could hear music a lot better. I loved it.
So anyone who's got hearing aids, you can do a real ear measurement and get an idea of how your hearing aids are working to the best of their ability, or assess new technology.
Thanks, Anne.
Okay, I think we really need to wrap this up. And thank you, Dr. Majit and Dr. Buttars. I'm sorry, David. And Anne, thank you for piping in. I don't know what we would do without you and your advice. Thank Deanna Baker for captioning. And just as the last word, our next Zoom meeting will be July the 14th. Normally we're dark in July and August, but if we can Zoom it, we're going to do it. So California Telephone Access, California Phones, it's a division of the California Public Utilities, provides amplified and captioning phones for people with hearing loss at no charge. So they will come and they will do a presentation on Zoom, and you'll be aware of everything they have to offer. So please come back July the 14th, and be sure to sign up on our email list so that you get reminders of the meetings.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Dr. Buttars. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hopefully this will prove somewhat informative for you. And certainly, please reach out to Tony or Anne if you have any further questions, and would be delighted to help address those issues. But thanks again, and stay well.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much. See you next time.
Okay.